Skin color.
Seriously.
Was that a hot mic?
No.
When you don't have eyelashes, you begin to realize how important they are.
You know what? I have to ask you about that.
That I have no eyelashes.
Yeah.
Alopecia.
You guys ready?
Too much charcoal lighter?
Too much barbecue.
Okay. I hope that guy doesn't come in again looking for Jeff.
About 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Soup to nuts.
Yeah. Hey, greetings everybody with the South Florida PGA. Glad to be with you again. I'm Rob Torrington with my partner, Barry Williams.
Hey guys, how are you?
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for dialing up. We're glad to be with you. And this week, as you know, we're going to talk about retirement planning. So we have a busy deck today. We're going to move through it pretty quickly. That's going to be important. That way you don't fall asleep. And secondly, we're going to cover a lot of topics that are probably valuable to you to know, not only for today, but for the future. So we'll go ahead and go to the first slide, Jackie. So Talk, Plan, Act, that's really the crux of what we're going to lay out for you today. A winning retirement strategy, and we love to use the word winning, great sports analogy, especially for golf, boils down to 3 steps. Talk about your retirement goals and the issues that will influence those goals, which we'll go over today. Plan, map out a plan for your goal by developing investment and saving strategies. And then finally, take action on those strategies by beginning your savings plan, your investing plan as soon as possible. So talk, plan, act. So let's go to the next slide.
Rob, yeah, the topics, as everybody can see on the slide, are essentially these 6. We're going to go through retirement planning, healthcare, Social Security, saving, which Rob referenced. One of the special things about challenges that women face in terms of saving for retirement. And we're going to very briefly touch on Medicare basics.
So let's go ahead and start with the first topic, the retirement landscape. Jackie. So the retirement landscape is the first section. So we'll go to the next slide. And here you're just going to see an overview of the things that come into play. So at the top, savings. The key there is how much you save, how often you save, whether or not your company has a pension. Most companies today don't have a pension. Whether or not your employer offers a 401k or some other employer-sponsored plan that you can invest in. And then other things that impact the road to retirement, such as being part of a sandwich generation. At some point in your future, maybe you're taking care of your kids and an aging parent, whether you have college loans to pay off, how much Social Security you're going to get, when you should collect Social Security, and how much might healthcare costs be part of your retirement budget. So when we talk about retirement planning, point number 1 that you need to consider is that people are living much longer today. We won't go into the reasons why, but you can see from the graph, in the 1900s, the life expectancy on average was about 47. Today, it's 78, almost 79 years old. And then if you go to the bar graph to the right, to the middle one where you see the average of 85 years, you'll see that if you're a married couple, there's an 82% chance that one of you is going to live past age 80. So one of the things we want to take into consideration is longevity, life expectancy, and that through medical technology and other reasons, people are living longer. So you may have to plan for a longer retirement.
Amen.
And then when you look at the longer lifespan, the next slide goes over the 3 major considerations of a longer lifespan. And the 3 considerations are the the cost of your health care, which is much more expensive than what you're probably thinking, the likelihood that you might need long-term care or you might need an assisted living facility or a nursing home, and the third is inflation. So the first is healthcare. We'll get into this a little bit more later, but if you look at the graph, you can see that the average annual expenditure for healthcare, starting at age 50 out to age 85, goes up quite exponentially. You might not have expected that you might need to budget so much money per year for healthcare, but that's just the fact. And then to the far right is inflation. And if you look at this chart, from 1990 to 2019, we give some examples on the different costs of goods, such as movie tickets were $4, now they're $9, and coffee was $2.89, now it's $4.33. I don't know where they're getting coffee for $4.33. The last time I went to Starbucks, it was about $7.
I want to know where the movies are $9.
Yeah. So here's the number you need to know. Write this down. If inflation is 3.5% a year, your cost of living will double in 20 years. 20 years, your cost of living doubles if inflation is around 3.5%, which is right about the historical long-term average.
Yeah, totally. Thanks.
Okay.
So the next chart deals with, do you think you'll work in retirement? Ironically, as the graph shows back on the bottom left, you're going to see the 73% thought that they were going to be working versus actually 27, 80% in the middle in 2009 versus 34 actual, and then to the far right, 80 versus 28. The point here is that 8 out of 10 folks think they're going to be working in retirement. The reality is they don't. Rob and I talked about this previously, and one of the things that's really enviable is to be able to actually work in retirement on your own terms if you want to. But the reality is most folks are not working in retirement. So
the next slide, we look at inflation again, and I just mentioned to you previously that if inflation's averaging 3.5%, your cost of living doubles every 20 years. And this chart is showing a 20-year period from 1998 to 2019. And the number I'm going to share with you, which it's not on the chart, is that during that phase, consumer price index or inflation went up in total by 60%. And what this chart is just showing is that some items go up a lot more than the average rate of inflation, such as hospitalization, medical services, college tuition, college costs, and housing. And some things go up at the rate of inflation, such as cars, furnishings, clothing. And some things in the last few years have actually gone down through to advances in technology, such as cell phone services, televisions, things like that. So next slide.
Healthcare and retirement. Slide. This is a particularly powerful chart, age-old problems. It tells a very, very simple story, which everybody here knows, and that is the older we get, the more you spend on medical expenses. You let your eyes fall down to the chart moving from left to right. The annual cost at age 65 on a monthly basis just tip out over $1,000 annually at $12,000 a year. As you move through the ages and progress up to age 85, point number one that's most important is to realize that the actual cost in 25 years has tripled. The second thing that's very, very important to realize is on the far right in the gray box, showing $606,000, $606,000 and change over the 20-year time frame for healthcare expenses, which in my book is a lot of change.
Probably a lot more than people think or anticipate that they'll spend out of their budget just on taking care of their health, going to the doctor,
Precisely.
Prescription drugs, paying insurance premiums for medical insurance, out-of-pocket expenses, and things like that.
Yeah, well, that number on the far right is pretty telling. It's almost 40,000. So
just that year.
Just that year.
Just that year. If you make it to 85.
Right.
So talk about healthcare savings accounts.
HSAs are great for those that are afforded those or have the opportunity to do them. Health savings accounts, as it says on the chart, allow for qualified out-of-pocket medical expenses to be funded using pre-tax dollars. If you see the chart down below, you will see the limits in 2020 and 2021. Let your eyes fall to the chart under 2021 showing an individual has $3,600 and a family $7,200 of contribution limit. This kind of operates like a 401k or an IRA in that it's very tax advantaged for you in terms of funding. For those that are interested in the deductibles, you can let your eyes fall down below. Point of this chart that's really important is if you have the opportunity to be afforded to participate in an HSA, and it's an incredibly good idea to do so.
So people can fund an account with pre-tax dollars, and they can fund it according to those limits: $3,600 for an individual, $7,200 a year for a family.
Right? With pre-tax dollars,
right? And it could grow, tax deferred, and they can use it for medical expenses, and all the distributions are tax free.
Correct.
For medical.
Right. On the next chart, there's a reference to it briefly, if we can move to that, because these are some of the stats on HSAs, which Rob just touched on. But one of the things is one of the things we were talking about is that some people, for whatever reason, seem to believe that if you have an HSA, maybe I can't put as much in my 401k or my IRA. It's not the case. You can go on ahead and contribute to your 401k or IRA as you normally do and still have the HSA. So as you'll see these 6 boxes, there's no cap in terms of what you can do in your other strategies. There's no time limit on using the money for what you build up in your HSA. They're portable, so if you leave your employer and go somewhere else, your HSA doesn't disappear. You can take it with you. But the point that Rob was talking about is on the bottom left, the triple tax advantage that you get. So your money goes in tax-free when you're putting it in. While it grows inside your health savings account, no taxes while it's growing on the growth. And when you pull the money out for qualified expenses, it's tax-free. So it's a triple. So most of the clients that we have, most people are investing these for growth. So it's just a really wonderful thing to use. Next page has just got some cautions. This is basically once you go into Medicare, you can't contribute to your HSA anymore. The withdrawals that somebody might make on non-medical expenses after age 65 are taxed. And there's a penalty, as you see below, in income taxes for withdrawals on non-pet medical expenses prior to age 65.
So I'm going to cover the last slide about healthcare savings accounts, and then we'll see if there's any questions that you guys have so far, whether it's about inflation or about healthcare savings account or the cost of healthcare. So this last slide talks about what happens to your HSA balance if you pass away. And there's 3 categorically. It depends on whether your spouse is the beneficiary, whether your child is a beneficiary, and whether your estate is a beneficiary. So if your spouse is a beneficiary of your HSA account, they can assume that HSA account and may continue to use it to fund their medical expenses on a tax-favored basis, or use it to pay their medical costs, premiums, etc. If your child is a beneficiary, they don't enjoy that same benefit as a spouse. So the child would take that money and they would receive that as income, and they would be taxed on that income the year that they received it from your HSA account. And the same would happen if your estate is a beneficiary. If your estate is a beneficiary, then your estate would be that would be taxable income to your estate in the year that you passed away. So that just goes over what happens to your HSA accounts at death. And before I open up questions, I'll just mention that HSA accounts are available from different providers that you can find online by doing a Google search. In other words, your employer doesn't have to sponsor a healthcare savings account for you to have one. You can set one up yourself, fund it yourself, and maintain it through the provider that you choose virtually online. So do we have any questions so far?
Give it 1 second, none right now.
Okay.
A little bit delay.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll give it a few minutes here.
While we're waiting, if you have any questions, just to keep us moving, this is a slide about the cost of long-term care. And before we look at the slide, I'll just explain the basics of long-term care. So long-term care is not medical coverage or not coverage for nursing services. Long-term care is you paying for help that you need if you're not able to do activities of daily living. So if you're not able to get yourself out of bed, if you're not able to get dressed, if you're not able to bathe yourself, if you're incontinent, if you can't feed yourself, things like that, that aren't cancer or aren't diabetes or aren't a heart attack or aren't something else that's medical related. It's really physical activities. So what these types of expenses are not covered by Medicare, which we'll talk about in a minute. They're not covered by Medicare supplements. They're not covered by health insurance. So some people will need this type of help, especially if you live to age 80 or over. And now if you look at the chart, and particularly the 2019 column where we've highlighted it in red, you can just see what the current costs today are for various types of long-term care services. The top one, private nursing home, is the most expensive. That's assuming you need not only the help for those physical activities, but you need 24-hour nursing care. The others are assuming that you don't need that nursing care, that you just need help with your daily activities of living either in an assisted facility or in your home. And as you can see, the average cost for needing that kind of help in a facility or in your home is around $50,000 per year. And one of the statistics is that about 20% of the population that makes it to age 80 needs this kind of help in their retirement lifetime. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there and check in on questions.
We don't have any of this.
Excellent. So we've covered the retirement landscape. We've now covered some of the keys about healthcare and retirement, and we're going to move to Social Security. So Barry, why don't you kick us off and talk to us a little bit about that?
Okay, great, Rob. Thank you. The graph or chart before you basically tells the story here. You'll see the human being standing there on the left. It's showing how much of your earnings will Social Security actually replace. And the moral of the story of this slide is essentially the lower income person has a greater percentage of their earnings replaced by Social Security. For example, on the left, the low income person, meaning at $23,000 a year, has a Social Security benefit tipping out just over $12,000 or 53% replacement of that former income. The far right, the $127,000, which is the maximum Social Security level that they use, has got a $32,875 benefit, replacing 26% of that former cash flow. The point of this is in doing your planning, doing our planning, we have to look and ask, can you live on that? And if it's not possible to live on that, we better get to planning for it now.
Absolutely, especially if you're a higher wage earner.
Correct.
Because Social Security will replace a much lower percentage of what we make.
Precisely.
So if you live, if you retire and you want to live on what you were making, you got to come up with the other 74%.
Bingo.
Okay.
Yep. So the next slide, if we're on it, what's the magic number? You guys may have heard this just in talking with your own family or with your parents. The bottom line thing that Rob and I would like everybody to go ahead and benchmark in their mind is that phrase, full retirement age. You'll see it referred to as FRA. That's the point at which you will receive 100% of your Social Security amount. You may have known people that have taken their Social Security prior to that age. So one of the things that Rob and I would like to point out is this, is if possible, to highly discourage taking Social Security prior to your full retirement age, or age 66 or 67, as you see in this chart, wherever that date falls. Because when you do so, if you have any earned income, Social Security will haircut you. In any event, after age 66, you could fund the next dot-com boom, and they're not going to take a dime of what you get from Social Security. So the magic number, the number you guys want to pay attention to in Social Security, is preferably waiting to at least full retirement age to do so. That's that on that chart.
So let's delve into this a little bit more detail. So what we're going to talk about in this chart is 3 Social Security recipients. One, Marie, who took Social Security before full retirement age. She started at 62. Bill, who took retirement at his full retirement age, which was 66. He took his Social Security then. And Sophie waited until age 70 to start collecting her Social Security. So if you move to the far right of that chart where you see it says total cumulative amount and average monthly benefit, you'll see that Marie, the dark blue, she took Social Security early, so she only got 75% of her full retirement benefit from Social Security. So she collected early, but she doesn't collect the full retirement amount. She collects a discounted amount for the rest of her life. Bill, the light blue, the medium blue, he waited to full retirement age. He collected 100% of his benefit. And then Sophie didn't collect at 66. She waited until 70, so she gets a premium. She gets 132% of her full retirement benefit. And what this chart is showing is that if you take it early, and you live out to age 86, you actually collect less money than if you waited to 66 or waited to 70. Even though you waited 4 years to collect, or maybe you waited 8 years to collect to age 70, by waiting, because you collected more per month, if you lived to 86, you actually made more money. None of us knows, right? Why don't you talk about that?
That's really to skip the next chart.
No, so none of us knows how long we're going to live, and so what we would say to you is, we would discourage taking it early, and encourage you to take it at your full retirement age, which is currently 66, and we'll talk about what our philosophy is on whether that age might change given the sustainability and solvency of Social Security.
Correct. Yeah.
So if we go to page 21, one page back maybe. Okay. This is the same point we just made on the last graph, just looking at it differently. So I'll be very brief. If you go to the far left-hand side of the chart, let your eyes go to the bottom. At 62, you get 75% of your benefit. It gradually increases to 100% of your benefit at age 66. And there it increases to 132% of your benefit if you postpone until, if you wait until you're 67, 68, 69, and then ultimately 70. You don't want to wait past 70 because you don't get a raise anymore.
Nope.
So that's not a good move.
Not a good move.
Okay, thanks. So point number 4, saving for retirement.
Great. Do we need to check in for questions, or are we good?
Don't have any yet.
No questions
Okay,
yet.
super.
Go ahead and put some questions in the chat if you have them. We'll get to them when we get to our next question break.
I'm visually challenged here. I can't look at a lot of numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and bottom line this chart. Guys, let your eyes fall on the red numbers there towards the top. Retirement needs, how much is enough? Simple. You want to plan on basically spending 75 to 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement. One of the things about this chart that shows you in terms of the way it's spelled out, it has all this numbers, is this fact. It's actually not in this chart. It's something Rob and I talked about. The reality is, how many people do you know drastically change their spending habits on a dime?
So in my experience, whether someone needed to change their spending habits, meaning they needed to cut back, or whether someone was able to spend more because they had plenty, I find that people, once they've gotten into a long-term spending habit, rarely change.
Correct. So in terms of doing planning for retirement, the two things that are needed to be involved are, number one, to plan. Number two, to figure that we're going to need 75 to 80%, but most importantly is to monitor that spending and make sure you don't outspend your assets, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the point of the chart. Let's go.
A good rule of thumb. All right, so what we're going to talk about here is the importance of an early start when you're investing. So we're on the left-hand side of this chart, we're looking at 4 investors, Jane, John, Susan, and Chris. Each of the 4 investors were putting away $12,000, $12,500 a year. The difference is Jane starts at 25, John at 35, Susan at 45, and Chris at 55. So Jane, starting at age 25, has saved for 40 years out to age 65. Her cumulative ending balance was $2 million. John waited 10 years, so he only had 30 years to save $12,500 a year. His cumulative balance when he turned 65 was half, $1 million. Now, as you see, he didn't wait 20 years. He only waited 10 to start, and his ending balance was half that of Jane's. But it gets worse. Susan started at 45. She contributed for 20 years. She ended up with $500,000. And then the last, Chris, didn't plan, didn't start early. He only had 10 years between 55 and 65. And he ended up with only $187,000 for retirement. So the walk away here is start young, start as soon as you can. The rule of thumb that Barry and I use, we tell people try to save at least 10% of your salary. That's what we call the pay yourself first rule. Then pay everybody else, like your car payment, your rent, your dinners out, whatever. Pay yourself first, because the longer you wait, the less you're going to have.
True.
Next slide.
Next slide. I get the simple charts here, so this is great. One of the things here in the Roth versus the traditional IRA, for those of you that know or don't know, the Roth IRA is funded with after-tax dollars, but it provides tax-free withdrawals in retirement, versus the traditional IRA that's funded with usually pre-tax dollars and is taxable when you pull it out on the backside. And this chart is basically trying to explain the preference for funding either a Roth or an IRA based upon what those anticipated taxes are going to be in your retirement. So on the far left, where it says your tax rates are lower in retirement, this is saying right next to the strategy, the favor would be going ahead and funding traditional IRA, because after all, you've got 10% less of a tax rate here than you did when you were working. The middle chart is basically showing a level playing field, so we'll skip it. But on the far right, the unusual circumstance of actually having a higher anticipated tax rate in retirement than when you were working. The reality is this, and Rob and I would both concur on it. None of us know what the tax rates are going to be in retirement.
Nope.
I'm very, very pleased with the fact that I can count on Washington to do everything rational in any event. We don't know what the tax rates are going to be. The bottom line is, if you have the ability to do both, that would be something that we both would say, please consider doing, because you'd have the benefit of both pots of money. So whenever possible, fund a Roth and a traditional and get the benefits of both if you're able.
Okay. Skip that one. That's just a disclaimer slide about taxes and penalties and things like that in IRAs. So this slide we're covering whether to borrow against your 401k or your company-sponsored retirement plan. You can probably tell the conclusion just by the title of the slide, the toxic effect of loans on retirement savings. The conclusion is don't borrow against your 401k. It's your absolute last resort. So what the chart is showing, for the sake of the chart, it's showing 40 years of someone investing in their 401k. There's two people, one took a loan, one didn't. Both of them made about 40 grand a year. They both got a 3% raise every year on that 40 grand. They contributed 6% of their pay to their 401k. The difference is that one of the two took an $18,000 loan, not
Wow.
$400,000, not 50, $18,000 loan when they were 40. They took 5 years to pay the loan back, and in doing that payback, they had to reduce their contributions to the 401k growth side in order to pay back the loan. The difference between the two, one took a loan, one didn't, was about $350,000 at the end, 28% less, 1.3 million versus 969,000. So again, if you can avoid it at all costs, don't borrow against your 401k.
But what about those people that say you're borrowing from yourself, you pay yourself back? I guess that's not good counsel, huh?
Well, math doesn't lie.
Thank you very little.
All right, so we're on to our fifth topic out of 6, so we're moving right along, right on time. So this is interesting. 3 things we're going to cover here is the challenges women face. 1, women live longer than men. 2, their healthcare costs are more expensive. And 3, they may lose their earning potential following time out of the workforce. So the first slide, what we're looking at is just the fact that women live longer. And the chart basically speaks for itself. The dark blue represents the percentage of women that live to 75, 80, 85, 90. And as you can see, the women that live that long always outstrip the men. There's always a larger percentage of women living longer than there are men. So it means women need more money in their retirement accounts in order to fund more longevity. Am I doing all of these?
I think you
It
are,
looks like
but I was, yes.
The second slide is that, these are, women are getting handicapped here. It doesn't seem fair, like I do on the golf course with my 18. What this is showing is that not only do women live longer, but their healthcare expenses are more. So if you go to the far right-hand column where you see the light blue numbers, you can see that whether it's 45 to 65, 55 to 65, et cetera, women's healthcare costs are 18 to 27% higher than men's, which is quite a bit. If you look at the bottom, it's 758,000 versus 966. So it's almost a $200,000 delta in healthcare costs, and that's from just living longer and the expenses related to that. It's not just living longer.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you're bringing up, quite frankly, most of us in this room probably at some level are aware of this already. I think the takeaway from this that's really important in terms of you bringing it up is whether it's somebody that's single, a single woman, or whether it's a married couple, it's clear that there needs to be attention paid to for planning specifically for that longevity and those additional expenses for women's care as part of a couple's plan. Wouldn't you agree?
I would. And the other thing I think we'll bring up when we talk about Medicare is that if you plan to retire before 65, you really need to budget for a significant amount of your money for healthcare insurance, because you're not going to have your company-sponsored insurance or whatever you're using now, and you're not going to qualify for Medicare till you're 65, and that's expensive.
It's a little bit expensive, yeah, I'd say so, to say the least.
The last slide, as it pertains to the challenges that women are facing, this slide shows that based upon time out of the workforce, upon returning to the workforce, women may lose some of their earnings power. So if you see, on average, if you're out 3, 6, up to 12 months, you could come back into the workplace earning 4% less than what you were. And if you're out 12 months or more, you could come back into workforce earning 8%. These aren't hard line numbers. These are just averages, but it does show a definitive trend that being out of the workforce and then coming back can be a handicap to your salary.
Yeah, true.
So it's more incumbent, I guess, for women and married couples to proactively plan around these variables of health coverage, of earnings power, and of longevity.
Amen. That's right.
Okay. So we're coming down the home stretch.
Want to see if we've got anything going in questions wise before? No questions. You're doing great.
Okay. The question chat box must be broken.
I don't think so. I think they understand everything.
So this is the last part, which is talking about the basics of Medicare. And we're going to keep it to the bare bones basics because the discussion around Medicare is a 45-minute root canal.
Yeah.
And we don't want to try to do that today after 35 minutes.
Yeah, I think so.
So what we'll do is cover the high-level items about Medicare. So Barry, why don't you start just with the basics on federal insurance for retirees?
Okay, super. As everybody can see here on here, basically we've got Medicare that's broken down into several components. Part A is basically the hospital part or the free part when you actually go to file. Part B is for the outpatient and the out-of-pocket expenses. Part D is the prescription drug portion. You've ever heard anybody say they have a Medicare Advantage plan or refer to Part C? That's private companies offering a parallel system or a replacement system that's Medicare approved. And people that do that will tend to do it because they can pick up some additional coverage and things like visual or dental, et cetera. And then the far right, it shows the supplement or a gap, Medigap policy. That's an actual policy that helps offset some of the expenses that Medicare doesn't cover. On a general basis, that's the landscape of Medicare. In speaking with Rob about this, there were 2 points that I thought would be particularly important to make that aren't on this. The first thing is to go on ahead for those of you that are close to age 65 to mark on your calendar 2 to 3 months in advance of your 65th birthday to go onto Social Security's website and enroll in Medicare. Whether you are on a spouse's plan or not, if you don't enroll prior to
spouse's private plan.
The spouse's private plan,
Yep.
correct. If you don't enroll, you face penalties and spaghetti, meaning that you don't need to face. So I tell my clients, I think Rob does too, mark it on the calendar prior to the birthday, go into the Social Security website, get yourself enrolled. The second thing Rob's already touched on before, I marvel at the amount of people that actually believe that Medicare pays for long-term care. And it's very, very important that you and I and everybody in the room realize, number one, no federal program is going to pay for Aunt Molly to be at Devonshire at PGA National at $7,000 a month. So even if there were a federal program that could do it, probably wouldn't be up to the level of what we could do on our own. So the 2 things are make sure that you're enrolled. And the second thing is there is no long-term care benefit through Medicare.
Yeah. Some people ask, why do I have to enroll in Medicare if I'm not going to use Medicare right away because I'm still working for ABC company and it's a better plan and I want to stay on my company's plan. And I really don't know the answer, and I'm not going to get into what the penalties look like. I just stress what Barry said. If you're still planning on working and not using Medicare insurance, you have to enroll anyway. It has nothing to do with collecting Social Security.
It's absolutely correct.
You don't have to collect Social Security, but you have to enroll for Medicare. And there's a window, and I forget, it's a couple months before. It's a couple months before 65 out to about 6 months after. Somewhere in that window, you've got to enroll to avoid the spaghetti and the penalties that Barry talked about.
Yeah.
And I know that might not be relevant for a lot of the people on the call today, but maybe it's relevant. Maybe you have relatives, parents, and this is, information that they need and a mistake that they could avoid. And it costs money.
It costs money, it costs time. And then if anybody has had the pleasantry of dealing with any federal agency on the phone, take your pick. Mark your calendar and get enrolled, or sit on phone for an hour and 20 minutes. Just going ahead and do it. It really makes sense to get it taken care of. So that's it.
And the last thing I'll say is about the Medicare is that when you retire, certain things aren't covered by Medicare, or maybe they're not covered by your Medicare supplement, and your healthcare savings account that you funded back in the day can pay for the difference, tax-free.
Yeah, if it's qualified expenses, then that's a different topic. But the HSA that we touched is a really, really great thing to do if people can do it. Can't stress it enough.
So what we covered today in the retirement landscape, healthcare, what those costs look like, Social Security, what those benefits look like, when you should file, how much you might get, saving for retirement, which is start early, do it often, do it regularly, pay yourself first, and then plan for the rest. Make a plan, put it into action, stick to it, measure your progress. If you have any questions for us, you're welcome to contact us directly. I think our contact information is on the back side of the deck, is it?
Yeah, and I'll send it out in the email.
And we thank you guys.
Yeah. Is Jackie going to send out the link?
Oh, that's right. Tell her about that. I forgot.
There is a link, I think, that we forwarded to Jackie I think it's Medicare.gov. Jackie, yeah, She's nodding yes. It's a one-page read for anybody that's in their early 60s, late 50s, or whatever, that just wants something in 2 minutes that can give you a good landscape on Medicare. Go on ahead and pay attention to the link that she sends out. It will also help define the enrollment period. And again, if there are any questions, contact Rob about it, and we'll obviously help.
Okay.
We do have a question. I don't think anyone in the room knows the answer, because it's about how competitive are the health insurance plans that are available through the PGA. So I'll let Chad know, who asked this question, that I'll look into it and try to get you an answer.
Okay. Yep.
Other than that, we don't have any other questions.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in again. Hopefully this has been valuable along with the other ones, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.
Yeah. Take care, guys.